on. My first question will go to Ms. Cobden, a former steel worker. I'm very pleased to see that you've decreased CO2 emissions by 31% over 30 years. So let's call it 1% a year. And understand as well that in order to get a big jump ahead, we're going to have to get some innovative technologies to make that happen. But 1% a year is a good base. If we can continue along that way, obviously some industries will do better, but nice to see steel on that track. You did talk a lot about the CO2 tax and how much you're in favor of transitioning the industry to this new CO2 paradigm, and yet you want all the tax back to the industry so it can do something to innovate. You want CO2 tax applied against imports, including from trading partners that will be were covered under certain trade agreements at this point in time. And it seems like the cost of this CO2 system is going to be more expensive and more difficult, more onerous to administer than not having a CO2 tax at all on your industry. So would it be fair for me to say you're actually not in favor of this, given the fact that it takes so much gerrymandering in order to make it work in the long run?
So just to clarify my comments, we're going to see large emitters pay about $200 million a year into the industrial component of the program. And our view is that, and there's been some discussion already on revenue recycling and that it should go to the province from which it came and all of that, fine. But our view is that that should be recycled back to the industries that have the most to, that can make the biggest change with the money in order to see our carbon emissions overall as a country go down. So this is the essence of our situation. We feel, and I think you're right, 1% a year has been really good. And that's what will continue, I don't know how much more of that we're going to be able to do for the next 30 years, but we're going to continue to do it. And we'll get more improvement incrementally. But what we are really talking about for the new investment is transformation, right? How do we create those really new technologies of the future that recast how steel is made? And frankly, not just in our country, but globally. Like, this is a real opportunity. No one else is doing it. And we don't think this is something that can be done overnight. We think that we actually need a systemic, year by year by year approach to find those solutions and really make those things work. I have some experience in innovation. I know that good projects, come and go.
Back to the question about the CO2 tax.
Yeah.
Because you do seem to be working around it as opposed to addressing it directly. Like, we'll take the tax, we'll pay the tax, we'll take it back, and we'll apply tax on everybody offshore coming in. Is that, say, a difficult way through a situation where you're actually dealing with a new tax on your industry?
So we operate in the world of what we have, and what we have is a regulatory system that we need to meet, and it's going to, and basically, we do not see our competitors having to meet that system. So we are very concerned about leakage.
Yeah.
And
Good.
We think there could be solutions to leakage. And one of the questions we have, and we're not necessarily saying we need to tax them on their way in. We need to look at ways, though, that supports the domestic industry's carbon objectives without doing those unintended consequences that you've identified in your question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to see what those are at some point in time. My next question for you, Ms. Cobden, still is, and I was curious on this, you talked about the inherent environmental benefits of Canadian steel.
Yeah.
The last time I checked, steel is composed of really two inputs, metallurgical coal and iron ore.
Yep.
And I don't know how those change as Canadian metallurgical coal goes over to China to produce, mix with iron ore and make steel. Is it the shipping you're talking about that the footprint is on?
Yeah, the fundamental, the facts that we can talk about specifically are the transportation costs. Of course, to your earlier comment, our industry is also in a regulatory framework that gives us, that has seen us improve our emission portfolio and our emission profile. But on a transportation level alone, we would save about we would have about a third of the emissions of imports coming in from China.
Okay. One question. Okay.
We'll have a little time later if you have another